Now for a fireside chat on the topic of moving on from Web 2.0. This will feature Fred Wilson, partner at Union Square Ventures, and Zeta's CEO and chairman, David A. Steinberg.
Thank you. More than once.
Did you interview Zeta?
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. Oh, he was great. He was such a good guy. All right, welcome. Obviously, we're winding down the day. We are winding down the day. So people are coming in and going out, but it's been an incredible day. We started the day, or I started the day with Isaiah Thomas, who is one of the best basketball players to ever live, an amazing story. And I'm finishing my day with Fred Wilson, one of the greatest investors of all time. Yeah, there's very few people who can sit in a room and say they were the seed money investor in Twitter, Etsy, Coinbase, Twilio, others, and truly be one of the most humble, shy, great men I've ever known. So
thank you.
It's I'm actually shocked we got you here today because I know how you love these things, but I really appreciate your coming.
David, we have really enjoyed being shareholders in Zeta, and couldn't miss it.
Here, I thought you were going to say you liked me, but I appreciate that.
Why would you think that?
I know, right? That would be a clear error in judgment on your part. As we think about what our topic is, right? So this is typical Fred. So I call Fred. I say, Fred, we're really going to blow Zeta Live out this year. We want to get to 100, 150 people in person. We're at over 400. We're going to get to 3,000 people online. We're over 7,000 people online. And I said, Fred, I would love you to come talk about Web 3.0. And Fred, without missing a beat, he said, no. I said, Fred, please, come on. You got to come talk to me. He said, all right, I'll come talk to you if I can interview you.
Yes, I did say that.
And I said, Fred, here's the good and the bad news. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say about Web 3.0. I think everybody wants to hear what you have to say about it. So then we started talking, and then we agreed, which I'll violate horribly, but we agreed that you would interview me for half the time and I would interview you for half the time.
Exactly.
But what we're really going to do is we're going to interview you, and we'll talk a bit about a number of concepts I believe in that I think you think are wrong, but we'll go from there. Let's talk a bit about Web 2.0, right? What did Web 2.0 give us? What was it? What's the definition? And how do you think it helped prepare us for the next level?
I always thought of Web 2.0 as the two-way web. I always thought of Web 1.0 as like we figured out that we could put stuff online. We could put a store online. We could put a newspaper online. We could put a magazine online. And I really think Web 2.0 was when we got the idea that the users were not just pulling stuff down, but users were putting stuff up, right? And so that got us Facebook, that got us YouTube, so on and so forth. And obviously that it's just a huge wave of adoption and usage that has powered many, many things. I think that's the good, what it got us. But interestingly, I think it also created some really powerful franchises that have made it harder for others to compete. And we all know this, but the thing, if you just look at it, for many years, Facebook was crowding out the advertising ecosystem, taking more and more share along with Google. And then along comes Apple, and they make a change, and boom, they screw everybody, right?
We don't like the IDFA, right? We're looking at, and I've always thought the Apple-Facebook relationship has been really interesting, right? Because Tim was on their board for years.
Right.
And he had to step off when him and Mark got into a bit of a scuff as Mark was thinking about building a phone, of all things, right? Which I don't know if they ever built or didn't build. But there's always been, since then, in my opinion, a bit of animosity
Right.
between those two companies. And I don't know, I think Apple woke up one day and said, listen, we can take advantage of this whole, move to privacy, which the elimination of the IDFA is not really additional privacy in my opinion, and not why Apple did it, but they did it tactically, very smartly, because they want to build their own advertising ecosystem.
Right, exactly. So, I think, unfortunately, we have these very, very powerful franchises, and companies like Zeta and all the companies in our portfolio got to navigate inside that world. And Apple can wake up one day and change the rules, and you just have to adapt. It's not like you're going to complain. You're going to go knock on
Well, you can
Apple's
complain,
door.
they don't care.
Exactly. So,
Thank goodness we never used Apple's IDFA, and we do not use a third-party cookie at Zeta to identify people or build models. So it sort of gave us a little bit of a leg up as those guys, changed their mind on stuff.
exactly. So I think that a lot of people are out there looking and saying, okay, well, can we change the rules a little bit so we're not so reliant on, these very, very big tech companies who, essentially are controlling Web 2. And so that leads us to Web 2.5 and Web 3. And Web 2.5 is your notion. So I want to hear your definition of Web 2.5.
Here we go. Okay, so when people talk about Web 2 and Web 3, I like your definition, put stuff up online, but I think a lot of people think the common definition is in Web 2, the large companies own everything,
Right.
and in Web 3, the consumers own everything.
Exactly.
Right? So when you think about that, I believe what's really going to win is Web 2.5. And we're already seeing that, right? So today, I equate it to what was wireless local number portability in the cellular ecosystem. So you and I are old enough to remember that if you owned a phone and you had a phone number and you wanted to switch from AT&T to Verizon, you had to give up your phone number.
I know, it's crazy.
Right. And then Tom Wheeler, who was on the board of my last company, was chairman of the FCC, said, this is nuts. The technology exists to switch the phone from carrier to the other. WLNP, wireless local number portability, was created, and you could switch carriers seamlessly. I see a day when creators own their own content, no matter where they exist in the ecosystem. So if you're currently a creator at Instagram and you want to move all of your content at once to TikTok, I think you'll be able to do that in the future. The other thing I think will happen, which is sort of like co-ownership, right? And then the other thing I think will happen is I think that creators will begin to participate in the revenue that is generated off of their creations and their wares. We're already seeing that at YouTube, right? So YouTube is one of the largest pays out, I'm sure, hundreds of millions of dollars at this point to creators. And I think we're going to see that trend. Ultimately, I think Instagram has made changes to try to support influencers, but they've not cut them in on the ad revenue yet.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I think that's coming.
Yeah, you can't really make money as a creator on Instagram. I mean, you can make fame on Instagram and then monetize elsewhere, but you can't make money on that platform.
I mean, there's probably 10 people. The Kardashians make money on
You
Instagram,
think
right?
Facebook pays them?
Oh, when you're saying, no, they're doing sponsored posts.
Exactly.
Right. But no, I don't think they're paying them. And I think ultimately for Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and others to continue to be the dominant platforms, Web 2.5 is them paying them as YouTube pays their creators.
Right. And why do you think that
I'm supposed to be interviewing you, Fred.
Well, but I'm interested in your theory, and then we'll get to my theory.
All right. Well, 2 5s before 3, so we'll go with that.
And but I'm curious why you think the fact that YouTube is paying and Instagram hasn't accrued more benefit to YouTube. Why don't creators put more energy into a platform that's paying them versus a platform that's not paying them?
It's a great question. But, basic economics would infer that they would, but social media is not currently driven by basic economics, right? So Esther Dyson, who I'm sure you know, Esther is a friend, talks about the attention economy, right? So social media is not driven on economics. It's driven on this attention economy. People are literally trading their lives for nothing more than attention and adulation, right? And they've not yet gotten to the point where they're like, well, I'm going to bail on all of this attention because back to your point, if they're becoming well known here, the last speakers here were Heather Ray El Moussa, formerly Heather Ray Young, and Tarek El Moussa. They have 6 million collective followers between the two of them. And they have built meaningful companies off Instagram. Right. He's built very large real estate businesses. She's building beauty products. So, in that way, they're benefiting, and in that way, they're using the platform to their own ends.
Right.
When you think of where we go from 2.0, where do you think it goes? So, is Coinbase sort of the de facto Web3 platform? I know it's different for crypto and
yeah, I would answer that by saying I think maybe Ethereum is the default Web3 platform. But the thing that excites me is this idea of an open database, right? So, actually, I think that's maybe the single most important innovation in all of crypto, which happened back when the Bitcoin white paper was written in 15 years ago.
When you wrote that paper,
I did not write that paper.
When you wrote that paper, Fred, where were you drinking? What was going on with that?
I think that the Bitcoin white paper was written by a group of people, not one person.
But CIA says if 3 people know anything, it's no longer secret.
Yeah, well, one of them died, a guy named Hal Finney, who definitely was a participant in writing the Bitcoin white paper, died a few years afterwards.
Did he die saying "et tu, Brute"? Or how do we know he was the guy?
Because he was one of the very first people to mine Bitcoin, and
so he had a head start.
Yeah, he did. But what they invented was a blockchain, which they didn't actually invent, but they did a couple things to make it really work. And think of a blockchain as just a database, right? It's not, but the simplest way to think about it is a database. But the difference is that there isn't a company running the database. Everybody's running the database. And so what they
sort of like the Wikipedia of databases?
Exactly. They had to come up with what they called a consensus mechanism. That's just a technical term. They had to come up with a way that a group of people could agree that this database right is correct and this database right is incorrect. Right. And so they came up with mining. They came up with the idea that we're going to incentivize people to run our software on these large computers, and all the people who are doing that are going to validate these transactions.
So effectively, the monetization, which is the output, which
right.
is currency,
right.
is solely to drive the blockchain's adoption.
Exactly, and to secure the blockchain, right? To make sure that only valid transactions would get written to it and invalid transactions would not get written to it. And what they invented basically was an open database that many companies could use at the same time, right? Okay, so now let's go back to Web2. And let's start back and say, okay, it's 2003, and I literally remember being at a conference with Reid Hoffman, my friend Mark Pincus, who started Zynga, but he had a social network called Tribe before that, Zuckerberg, and a few others who were literally talking about the social networks that they were going to build, right? And they went out and built them.
That they did.
Imagine if they had built those social networks on a blockchain as opposed to, MySQL. Okay, so Facebook had their version of MySQL, and LinkedIn had their version of MySQL, and so they're now writing all the data to their own database,
sure.
Right? And everybody in this room is into data, marketing data, so you'll understand this. Had they built those on the blockchain, all that data would be on a public database, not a private database.
Would that have hurt their barrier to entry as competitors tried to come in?
Absolutely.
So why would they do that, Fred?
The only reason that you would do that
okay.
is if you thought that the native currency of that database, the token, the Bitcoin token or the Ethereum token, was going to be worth more than your stock was going to be. So in essence, the whole idea of a blockchain is we're going to all work together to build applications on top of this common database. We're all going to share in the native token of the database, and we're going to get wealthy on the token. We're not going to get wealthy on our stock. That's the idea.
Well, so
it hasn't really happened yet.
I was going to say, has that actually happened for anybody yet?
Well, it's happened with Ethereum.
Sure.
It's happened with Bitcoin.
So the currencies themselves.
And it's starting to happen a little bit in what they call DeFi, decentralized finance,
yeah.
where Uniswap has gotten pretty valuable, and Compound and Maker, which are these lending platforms, have gotten kind of valuable. It is happening, but we have definitely not seen the Facebook of Web3 or the LinkedIn of Web3.
But you think we will?
I do. And by the way, LinkedIn is kind of a great example of this, right? So we all have our resumes on LinkedIn. I have mine. Do you have yours on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn, yeah.
But it's not really your resume. You haven't invested any time. and energy in it.
Somebody who actually works with me recently put up a bunch of stuff on it because
Is
a
it
lot
accurate?
of people follow. Yeah, no, it's very accurate.
Okay, good. So
It's not detailed, but it's very accurate.
Okay, so you were on LinkedIn. Okay, so the thing about that is that LinkedIn controls that resume. So if I wanted to do a search, right, and see CEOs of the top marketing companies in the world, the marketing technologies in the company world, one of the results I would get would be you, right? And then I'd want to
Then you try to sell me insurance like everybody else on LinkedIn.
I would want to reach out to you.
I'm just kidding.
And they're going to make it expensive for me to reach out to you.
That they do.
And it seems like, well, wait a second. It's my data. It's my resume. It's your resume. Why the hell are we having to pay LinkedIn?
Oh, but it's the same thing on Facebook. Like you're putting up all your family
I got it.
photos. You're like putting all your information up there. They're selling the ads. We're actually helping to manage them more efficiently for our clients, but they're keeping the money.
Exactly. I think, actually, a LinkedIn competitor be a great thing to build on Web3. Because you say to people, take your resume off of LinkedIn, put it on the Web3 resume database. You'll get some tokens for doing that. And if this thing turns out to be valuable, you'll share in the value of it. And it's going to be open so anybody can build an application. The basic idea is that the database is open and public. So we're all putting our resumes into an open database, and then anybody who wants to build a business on top of that can. And by the way, there are a lot of people who would love to build businesses on top of LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't let them.
Well, Microsoft owning them probably doesn't help.
I understand why LinkedIn doesn't let them.
Yeah.
Because LinkedIn views it as, hey, that's my data.
That's their asset.
Right, exactly. So I understand, and I'm not arguing that LinkedIn should. I'm simply saying there is another vector for competition available, and it could work. I'm not saying it will work, but it could work.
No, it's interesting. I mean, are you familiar, I'm sure you are, with So Rare?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about that company, right? So you've got a company that I think is one of the great companies of Web 3.0.
Right.
And in open disclosure, I'm an early investor in them. But so they sell the cards for European football.
Right.
You buy the cards, it's a limited edition card. You then can play fantasy European football that weekend. You can only play fantasy football with the cards you've purchased.
Right.
The better the player is, the more valuable the card. Whoever wins the fantasy gets a big payment of tokens.
Right.
Based on the money that's coming in, which backs the token, and then you could use those tokens to buy other cards and become a better team.
Exactly.
So they've effectively built what everybody now is lovingly calling an economy, right? So they sell you the cards, they have the aftermarkets for the cards, they've created the token to transmit the cards and transfer the cards. They give money back to the buyers of the cards in the form of prize money with every time they win, or prize tokens. This company will, I can't disclose their revenues, but we're talking, billion plus a year in net revenue in this business. How is that to you Web 3.0, and how is it not?
Well, it's Web 3.0 because I own the cards, right? And if I want to sell the cards, I can sell them to you.
But you have to sell them through their marketplace.
Well, so it's not really fully Web 3 yet.
That's my point.
But if it's built on a blockchain, if the whole
Which
thing,
it is, yeah.
then that could happen if they wanted to make that happen, because their cards are running on either the Ethereum blockchain or the Solana blockchain or whatever blockchain it's running on. It could absolutely happen. The fact that they are not letting anybody build a third-party marketplace suggests that they are a Web 2.5 company.
My point, thank you. Right, so, but back, which was the point I was trying to lead to, how do Web 3.0 companies create a moat around their business?
Well, I think that what happens is the moat tends to happen down at the blockchain level, and the applications tend to be much more of a commodity business, right? So
What does that mean?
so if thousands of companies built on a blockchain of resumes. And let's call that blockchain, res chain, okay?
So you're building a new blockchain.
Yeah, well, okay, for the sake of this argument, I'm building a new blockchain.
I never argue with you.
It's called res chain, okay?
Okay.
And you can put your resume on res chain, and you can get some res chain tokens, and I can do the same thing, and we all got res chain tokens, okay?
Okay.
Now that we've built this, and everybody's got a resume on res chain, all of a sudden, every company in the recruiting business is like, oh my God, I'm going to build it. I'm going to build an application on res chain, right? Those applications, I think, will not be that defensible because it's running on public data.
Right.
But the database itself, res chain, is going to be super valuable because now there's thousands and thousands of applications built on top of it.
How's it make money?
Res chain token goes up in value.
So in this case, I build the blockchain. I issue 1 billion tokens.
Well, I would
I'm making a
encourage you
number
to issue more like 100 million.
Okay, great. So we issue 100 million.
Yeah.
I keep half of them?
Most projects keep somewhere between 25 and 40% of them.
All right, so let's say I'd keep 40.
Right.
If that's the case. So now I've got...
You're like the guy I play golf with, right? Whenever we bet, he says, more, more. You're like, I'm going to keep more.
No, I just want to understand. So now I've got 40 million, Resi tokens, or
Right.
whatever we're calling this. And effectively, the value is deemed of the token what, by the way, and this is the same as anything else, what people are willing to pay for.
Exactly.
Right?
But
Which is no different from a shirt, right?
Typically, what happens in these blockchain ecosystems, or whatever you want to call them, economies, is there's a fixed number of tokens, and the tokens are required to access data. So the more people who are accessing data,
So there's an actual use to it. So the application guys have to use tokens.
Yes.
To build on top of it.
Yeah,
Which
and-
creates value for the 100 million tokens.
Exactly.
Of which I own 40 million, and 60 million are trading between other people.
Exactly.
And I guess then, in your case, for me to make money, I have to sell my underlying asset. I got to sell the 40 million tokens I own to create value.
Well, most examples of this, people sell some of the tokens and hold on to some of the tokens.
No, I get it. So we've already gotten rid of 60 million. We kept 40 million.
Right.
But that's my asset.
Right.
That's all I got,
Right.
money-wise.
Yeah.
Because the other 60 million are gone.
Right.
Have I sold those 60 million? I get any cash out of that, or I just give it away?
Usually it's a combination of that. People will sell some to raise money for the project. They'll give away some to get other people to participate.
But de minimis amounts.
Well, I mean, it ends up being 60%.
I understand. But the value in this equation is the 40% I keep escalates in value as everybody's using the platform, and I own that 40%.
Yeah.
But to date, like, I can't, buy my wife a birthday present without money, fiat currency. If I want to convert my 40% to money so I can buy my wife a birthday present, I have to use my asset.
Correct.
So effectively, even if I win, I have to liquidate my primary asset to pay people.
But it's not that much different than, at one point you owned 100% of Zeta.
That was a very short point.
And then, you sold some of Zeta to finance the company.
Yes.
And maybe when the company went public, you sold a little bit so that you could buy your wife a fancy birthday present. I hope you did.
God, I have to. If I don't, she's shaking her little head over there. But,
If that didn't happen, you should be
fine.
ashamed. You should be ashamed.
She gets plenty of presents.
But in any case, it's not that much different, honestly, than what you've actually been doing.
It's massively different because Zeta makes tens of millions of dollars in profit a quarter. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Going to get in trouble for the statement I just made.
So you were clearly allergic to Web3.
I'm clearly allergic to not making money, I'll tell you that. But what I'd say is the underlying business is profitable. In Zeta's case, it's not in a lot of other companies, but we've projected I'm going to be very careful here, but we've projected a lot of EBITDA this year. And a disproportionate percentage of our EBITDA, as you well know, drops to free cash flow. So the underlying asset of Zeta is profitable. The underlying asset of ResiBlock is really not, right? The only way to create value is for the 40% of the tokens, if I'm lucky, not 20, the 40% of tokens to escalate in value, right? So, but at some point, if I've got to pay my bills and buy lots of presents for my wife so she doesn't leave me, I've got to sell all of my 40% of tokens.
Well, I don't think you would sell all 40% because I think what happens in these systems is that the value does accrue over time. Look, it goes down, right? If you look at the history of Bitcoin.
No, but it could be 10 years. It could be 20 years. I'm not suggesting I do this in 3 months. I'm saying at some point, that asset, if you're liquidating it, runs out, right?
No, because...
Can you print more? Can I?
Yes.
Now we're talking. Let's print some more.
There's some of these systems that are inflationary. There's some of them that are actually deflationary.
Interesting. So what you're suggesting, and what I would buy, is if I had the ability to print more of these, then it could become self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Right? But if you've got 40%, I mean, listen, you love buying apartment buildings, right? It's your hobby.
I like making apartment buildings. I generally buy something like a former factory that made windows, and I turn it into an apartment building. That's kind of what I like to do.
I understand, but you don't do that just because you like doing it. You like to then own the asset. You then generate cash flow out of the asset. I'm sure, knowing you, you love your kids and you spend a lot of time on that type of stuff. We don't need to get into that today.
That's true.
But the reality is that, you're buying assets in that case where people are paying you rent.
Right.
And it generates cash. I still don't get how companies make money in Web 3.0. I get the escalation of asset value, right? I'm not, intellectually I understand it. What I'm trying to figure out is...
Well, let me give you an example.
Please.
In the decentralized finance business or the DeFi business, there are these... let's take Uniswap, for example. Okay. Uniswap is a place where people come to swap tokens. But it's decentralized because there's a smart contract, the Uniswap smart contract, which is now version 3, that all the swaps happen in. They don't charge a fee for assets that are swapped on the Uniswap smart contract, but some of their competitors do. So
Smart competitors, but keep going.
And so let's say that $1 billion of assets get swapped on Uniswap.
Okay.
And let's say it's a 25 basis point fee, then that smart contract is collecting a fee and distributing that fee to everybody who holds the token for that decentralized. Now, there are regulators who look at that and say, oh, that looks like a yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So there are reasons why some people don't charge fees.
But if they don't charge a fee, how do they make money?
Well, they don't make money right now.
How do they one day make money?
By charging a fee.
Got it. So, by the way, I buy that, right? Like, I grew up...
It's just that...
It's just early is what you're saying.
I think a lot of people don't want to get in the crosshairs of regulators quite so fast.
Right. Well, so I remember, for many years in the late 90s, where it's like, if you build it, they will come, right? And it was the more content you generated, the better it worked.
Page views, eyeballs.
That is what it was, right? So how many page views did you have? And we know a few companies that won big from that era.
GeoCities. We were the seed investors in GeoCities back in the day, and they were bought for $3.5 billion, and they made a little money, but it wasn't a lot.
No, but I was actually thinking more like AOL and MSN and Amazon and Apple.
But the AOL and MSN, they had dial-up businesses they charged money for.
No, I understand. But I'm saying they still had the vast majority of that coming through there. So what you're suggesting is Web 3.0 is still early. They're looking to get to scale.
Yeah, they're in the eyeball phase.
Right. And as they get through that, there'll be some winners and there'll be some losers.
Absolutely.
Fred?
And I want to be invested in the winners.
Well, so far,
like Zeta.
by the way, so far you're batting very well. I would say the most interesting thing you're doing is focusing on mini nuclear power plants for people's homes and offices. But unfortunately, we won't be able to get into that today.
I want at some point to be able to have a nuclear reactor the size of my phone.
Yep. Well,
that I can stick in my pocket
put it in your back pocket, Fred,
and
not the front.
be able to generate power. Because if there was uranium in here, we're going to end, but if there was uranium in here, we could basically create a nuclear reaction that would just sit and run for years and years and years and create power.
By the way, maybe next Zeta Live, you'll come and talk to us about nuclear power.
You think anybody would want to hear that?
I would.
Okay,
And
well, you and I
ultimately,
would.
that's what I care about.
Oh, okay. That's
All
probably a
right.
good one to end on.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.